Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football.
Seahawks fans, welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, here with Keith Myers. Keith, talk to me. How you doing?
Doing good. It's another week of the summer that's trickling by, and we're getting closer to training camp. I can't wait for players to start reporting and for us to actually have more news stuff to talk about. But yeah, it's glad to be here and talking some Seahawks football with you.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, me too. Believe me, I am really happy to be here. And Keith, we've got like fun shows coming up. I mean, this show is going to be awesome. We're talking about the 5 breakout players on defense. Last week we did the offense. That was super fun. This is going to be a great list because the defense is just packed, just loaded. I would imagine you had the same difficulty I had putting this list together. Yeah. And then Tuesday afternoon, we are going to record our 5th annual beer and question and answer show, which is just always fun. It's just one of those shows that we take out of the 52 that we record every year. And it's the one that's not necessarily completely focused on football, but it's focused on us and some beer sampling and some questions. Some of them are football related, but others are just really fun and kind of get us to kind of open up a little bit and just have a laugh or two. So that's a great show. And then a reminder for everybody on the 19th, which is a Monday of July, Keith and I are going to appear with Dan Viennes from the Emerald City Sportscast. And we are going to do a live event show in person at Ozzy's Tavern in downtown Seattle from 3 to 6 p.m., their happy hour. And we are going to have special guest Corbin Smith, possibly a couple others. There's going to be some giveaways. We're going to do it. It's a training camp kickoff show. So the week prior to training camp, we're going to all get together and 3 hours of Seahawk talk and banter and guests and just all sorts of fun in person, which is the key on this thing up in Seattle. We're hoping to have a whole bunch of folks out. So if you're listening to the show and you can make it down there, get onto our website at SeahawksPlaybook.com. All the information is on there for the show or on Twitter. And we'd love to have you down there. Submit some questions when you first show up, and we'll try to get through those too as the show goes on. It'll be a great time. So what are we doing today, Keith?
We're looking at the defense, and we're trying to find out who we think are going to just have that breakout year, that year where they just take that big step up from being, a role player into being, a very dependable starter, or from being a starter to being a star. Like, who do we think is going to be that guy that takes that step? And we each had to bring 5. I understand you brought 8 in typical Bill fashion.
Yeah. Yes, of course.
And
and how did you put yours in order?
Quite scientifically. It was this long mathematical process of me looking at the list and going, that's good.
I like it. Right. Okay. So we're both in the same boat. We just kind of wrote some names down as they popped into our head. And then that was the order in which we thought that they would be talked about on the show here. So I understand.
We're going to go reverse order though, right?
Reverse order. I understand we have at least one difference, which will be good for the show and for the listeners, just so that we have something that, we don't agree on necessarily, or could be somebody new to talk about.
Yeah, it's boring when we talk about it. We agree with everything. Much more fun when you're telling me I'm wrong and all of that.
I'm looking forward to that today. Let's go. I'll save my 3 extra for the end, just in case.
Okay.
All right.
What's your number 5?
My number 5. Oh, you want me to start? My number 5 top 5 breakout player for the Seahawks in 2021 is Ahkello Witherspoon. And there were a number of players I think that you could put into this category, even from the defensive back group. And he is a guy that's brand new to the team, signed a $4 million fully guaranteed deal as a free agent to come on and compete for that spot that was given up by Griffin. And he's got the pedigree. He's got the ability. What he's lacked, at least so far in the NFL with San Francisco, is the consistency. Third round pick in 2017. I know that he was probably in the mix for Seattle during that draft. He just fit the prototype of what they were looking for at the time. He appeared in 47 games, 33 starts. He didn't come here to be on the sidelines or have a backup role. This guy is coming in to compete for that starting spot. And he's going to be, to me, I'm not exactly sure who else you would put up against him that would really have a legit shot at that, except for Trey Brown, maybe as a rookie to come in and take that spot. So he will have that opportunity. I just think Akello, with his experience and length and playing style and already knowing the defense pretty well, gives him a pretty decent leg up. That's why I think he's going to pop a little bit. He's got that 4.4 speed, that length. He does well at times. He looks very competent, very good. He breaks on the ball. He's got some nice ball skills. He's not a guy that's going to miss a lot of interceptions that are coming his way, and he's got the ability to catch it. He's not going to drop them. He's a guy that's going to be able to go up and get the ball and so forth. So to me, he's got an opportunity with Seattle that I think he just needed a fresh start, get out of Shanahan's doghouse, which he was in San Francisco, and the injuries, and start over here with Pete Carroll and see if that makes any difference. And maybe he gets on track. And if he does, I think he'd be a breakout player.
Yeah. I mean, talent wise, he's got what it takes to be a great player at the position. He's actually my number 3 player. So I had that ranked a little higher just because I thought it was a little more of a sure thing, in part because
you think
his tape is better than his reputation. Now he's played.
That is true. And that comes from him being in Shanahan's doghouse. I kid you not.
That's part of it. And part of it is he has played hurt. And when he was playing through injury, he, wasn't as explosive and that kind of stuff and had some problems. And so people look at those games and go, oh, well, that's where his talent is. But that's when him playing hurt. When he's healthy, he is, he's a top tier guy, but you don't have a coaching staff that's talking you up and helping you with your image, and you play through some injuries and it doesn't go well. Like the combined aspect of that is he's got a reputation for being kind of an average guy when his tape is significantly better than that. So I've got him up there as my number 3 pick.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I could understand him being as a 3 guy, your third guy, just based on the fact that the group itself, the defensive back group, is possibly the weak link on here, and he might be able to pop out of that group and kind of emerge. That's one way of looking at it. The other way is the way that you explained it, where it seems like an obvious choice, where he's got a real legit chance to pop and quote unquote surprise people, even though he's got the tape to back up sort of, what we're expecting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay. My number 5.
Yeah.
I thought this one might surprise you a bit, but I'm going to go with Brian Monet.
That does surprise me, honestly.
Defensive tackle.
Yeah. No, I get it. But explain yourself.
So the Seahawks were really high on him, coming in as an undrafted rookie and a 360 pound run stuffer. He, fought his way onto the roster. Last year, he was the 3rd defensive tackle in that rotation and played some good minutes, some good snaps, kept Snacks Harrison on the sideline for a couple of weeks until Monet got hurt. Monet then, when he came back, Harrison went back to the sideline. Harrison was unhappy about that and asked to be cut. But the team liked Monet over a guy that a few years ago was an All-Pro. that will tell you a little bit about his work ethic, his knowledge of the defense, being willing to do what the team asks him to do. And he's just such a mountain of a man that guards and centers are going to struggle with just, being able to try and move him. He's so big and strong, and you combine in that, good mental discipline to stick to his gaps and his assignments and all of that. I just think that his role keeps increasing as the longer he's here because he keeps earning it. And he's now going into his third year, his first where he's going to have a chance at starters minutes. I think we could see him really earn that spot and look like a guy that you want in the middle of your defense for the next 5 years.
Wow. He's just got such a different body style than Poona Ford that it's just hard to even compare those guys. And then you've got Al Woods in there, who's known to be a run stuffer. So you've got kind of three guys that really make their living kind of stopping the run, although Poona is looking more and more diverse as time goes on. That is a group. When you take a look at the entire defensive tackle group, that is a group that would allow a guy like Monet to really kind of step forward and take a spot and really kind of make it his own. The other guy that's, that looks like he could maybe have an impact. There's two. I think Miles Adams, they really like Lattimore as well. And then Kim Dici is kind of the wild card in this entire thing. We just don't know because he's got the world premier talent. He was the number one college recruit the year he was recruited into college. He was the number one guy, regardless of position.
Yeah. And he was a first round pick.
Yeah.
And I mean, his college tape was phenomenal. He just never put it together down in Arizona. It just never became, where he in, but
work ethic, injuries, off field stuff. I mean, all of it.
Yep. And so he's a guy that definitely, I think, fits into the rotation and the equation and all of this. The other thing that I thought about with this is because they've got all the run stuffers, Monet's body type says he should be a nose tackle. And Poona Ford flashed so much ability last year, just even more than already being really good at it being a nose tackle. I wonder if they move Poona at times over to the 3 tech and just tell him to get after the quarterback and what that does and whether, he can have more of an impact. But that means that Monet is going to get more snaps doing the nose tackle duty because Al Woods isn't going to do that. And that's not who he is. He's a run stuffer, but he's a 3 tech. He's a smaller guy. So to have Monet over at the nose tackle just means he's going to have more opportunities and more snaps, which again was why I had him on here. But he's number 5. So he's a guy that we'll see, what his role ends up being. But last year was really promising for him.
I agree. I mean, everything that you said up front about him and him just kind of taking that spot away from Snacks and all that is absolutely true. And I think it's easy to forget about a guy in the interior like that, and especially a new guy you've never really heard of before and so forth. And you're not even paying attention during a game if you even take any snaps, but you look at the snap counts later on, you look at the tape, you look at the performance, you listen to the coaches talk about guys, his name comes up. You're right. I mean, he's probably somebody that we should be paying attention to, at least through camp, to see what happens there. In fact, that whole interior defensive line is going to be interesting because they've talked about moving some guys that are typically on the outside, more inside, Collier being one of them. Collier took a lot of snaps inside last year as well, but more so maybe this year just because of the sheer numbers of guys they have, capable guys they have on the outside. Collier may be asked to move inside more consistently this year as well. So fun group to look at. Monet, awesome. All right.
Number 4.
My number 4 is a guy I just mentioned, Robert Kimdichi. 3 tech, almost a 300 pound 3 tech, 6'2", 6'3". His best season in Arizona, you mentioned Arizona, was 2018, where he had 32 tackles, 4.5 sacks in just 10 games. So that's not a bad stat line for that guy. It's just not what I think people wanted and expected. And of course, he had some injuries that year and only played in 10 games. It's Pete loves reclamation projects, and this is the definition of that. Robert Kimdichi. And so he's only appeared in 29 games in his entire 4-season career. And if he were to mentally put it all together, because physically, I think he's got the tools to do whatever Seattle wants him to do. And I think he could have a significant role here just from the roster aspect. There's a spot for him if he takes it. And so, Carroll said he's active and he's explosive and he's going to be a real competitive part of this group. I mean, those are Pete's words. So I think there's some expectation level already there that he could make this roster. Now, this is one of those guys where he could be cut before camp even begins, or he could be the last guy cut out the door after training camp, or he could make this roster and have a significant impact. I mean, you could go a lot of different ways with him. And I put him on the list because I do believe that from what I'm hearing and what I've seen, that he's got a legit chance to make the roster and have an impact on the roster. And that puts him on this list.
Yeah, he was one of the guys that I just left off when I was trying to narrow my list down and get it to 5. He was one of the guys that just...
Keith is secretly talking about his 6th guy right here. Yes, I'm just saying.
But here's the thing. I brought a list of 5. I didn't bring a list of 8. I'm just saying that he was, and for all the reasons you were saying, he's got all the physical gifts you could possibly want out of a pass rusher on the interior. He's just got to get it done between the ears. And you're right about Pete Carroll loving these reclamation projects. He has had kind of a parade of former first-round picks that flamed out when their first team come through here on a prove-it deal with nothing guaranteed, no salary, or league minimum, with the idea that, hey, if they put it together, they get a great player on a cheap contract, and the player gets to revitalize their career and go out onto the market next year and earn big bucks. And a couple players have taken the opportunity and run with it. A lot of them haven't.
Speaking of, Josh Gordon just filed for reinstatement again. It's like, how many times do you take a chance on Josh Gordon or come to his defense or put him on the roster just in case? And what's going to happen with this thing?
They've never put him on the roster. I mean, okay, technically they did last year for a day, but they signed him, but he was instantly put onto the suspended list, so he doesn't take up a roster spot. And if he's suspended for games, he doesn't get paid. So they didn't pay him anything. He didn't take a spot from someone else other than for 24 hours.
So what's the Seahawks affinity for this player where no other team has an equal interest?
I think there are other teams with interest. Seattle's just a soft landing spot for him because he's here. He knows the coaching staff will back him. They'll wait for him if they have to. And so I think he just continues to sign these 1-year, league minimum deals in hopes that he can get himself, reinstated and a chance to play. And for the Seahawks, there's no downside.
It seems like, in addition to Pete wanting these guys around, it seems like these guys are actually choosing Seattle to be able to come and kind of have this opportunity, and I don't think Seattle would engage a player unless they felt like this player was serious about the mental part of the game. They're not about wasting time. Mm-hmm. They're about giving opportunity, but opportunity needs to be earned. And, at least players feel like they have that equal standing in Seattle to be able to have an equal chance regardless of their previous stops.
Yeah. And a lot of that comes from Pete's reputation, with the whole always compete thing, which has not borne as much fruit in Seattle as it did in college, but just the idea that, the better players play. If you come in and work your tail off and you're better than the guy in front of you, you'll get more playing time than him, and you'll move up on the depth chart. So guys recognize it as an opportunity to come in and revitalize their career, get back into the league.
As long as they earn it.
Yeah. But nothing's going to be handed to them. I think that was made clear with Lindale White before Pete's first season.
There you go.
You know, USC star running back, one of the first people signed by Carroll when he got into town, and he made it to the first mini camp, showed up out of shape and, you know, acting like he was like, whatever, I'm here.
Entitled.
And Pete threw him off the team and said he wasn't ready to be a Seahawk, and never brought him back, never engaged with him ever again. Just, nope, that's the attitude you're going to have. You're not going to be here. And that was a very interesting
statement.
Yeah. I mean, it really just kind of set the bar as for what the expectations are. And so, I mean, that's the negative side, right? You show up and you're not ready, but how many Doug Baldwins are there? Or, you know, Richard Sherman and Cam Chancellor, who were low round picks that, you know, fought their way onto the roster and into the starting lineup and then exploded into being stardom. There's a whole list of those too. So
Byron Maxwell and Jeremy Lane, and I mean, on and on and on.
Yep.
All right. Red Bryant's like a good example too.
Yeah. Red Bryant was basically a failed interior defensive lineman that was probably on his way out of the league.
Yeah.
And, you know, Pete and then D-line coach Dan Quinn moved him to defensive end. And you're like,
that's the last opportunity.
330 pounds. What are you doing playing him at defensive end? But they saw something and they're like, you know, he'll do what we need him to do there. And he was really good at setting that edge, being that 5 tech. You are not running against Seattle to his side of the field. And I mean, his size and strength, is defensive tackles who are used to work, or offensive tackles who are used to working against speed rushers, had no idea how to handle him. And, you know, so it was just a great match of finding a talent that a player can have, that he has, and then going, okay, how do we use that?
All right. I think, are you on 4 or 3?
I'm on number 4. So, because we already did my number 3. So my number 4 is the one that I know you don't have, because it's the one name that came up pre-show, is defensive end Alton Robinson. The 5th round pick a year ago. Last year got had a rotational role at times, in and out of the lineup, but when he was in, he flashed. The reason why everyone was surprised he was a 5th round pick and not a, you know, 2nd round pick. That first step is quick. He's big, he's strong, he's very fast for a defensive lineman, and he is going to give offensive tackles a lot of trouble with his ability to get upfield with a lot of burst. And now he's been here for a year. He knows the defense better. He knows the scheme better. And, you know, I'm expecting him to kind of come in and be like, yeah, I know you got a lot of names here, Carlos Dunlap and whatnot, but I'm playing too, and I'm going to earn this playing time.
You know, it's interesting, Keith, because he's in a long line of players that I think you and I have seen over many years where they look like they've earned playing time. They perform beyond expectations. In fact, they look like they could make a significant impact given more opportunity, yet they don't seem to quite earn the same interest from our own coaching staff, and they wait and bide their time, and other players who are maybe equally talented or have equal ability are before them, and so forth. So to me, that was the case last year. I think it was the case the first year with like a guy like Marquis Blair, for example. His rookie year had kind of the same thing where every time he was on the field, he looked like he was making a serious impact, but apparently there was enough mistakes in between that he didn't gain the confidence or the trust of the coaching staff week in, week out. what was going on with Alton Robinson that you could tell where he couldn't break through completely to the, a larger role?
I just think it was a lack of impact, lack of consistency. He flashed potential and, ability, and you watch certain plays and you're like, wow, this guy's going to be good. And then you watch, his next 10 plays and you forget that he's on the field. Um, and I think there's a lot of nuance to being an elite player at this level, and he still needs to learn all that stuff. But the physical talent's there.
So I want everyone to know that I did write him down. Like he's right here, right there.
Yep.
Okay.
He's one of your 8, but not one of your 5.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. I think Alton Robinson could definitely have an impact this year. There's just so many, like you said, there's just so many guys right now stacked up waiting to have their opportunity there. It'll be really interesting. And this is why this list is kind of built, is for players like Alton Robinson, because once training camp starts, that's where the fun begins for guys like that, because he doesn't get a chance to really show up until pads are on, players are going full speed, and he gets an opportunity to start beating offensive linemen to different spots and to the quarterback and so forth, and just really causing disruption. That's where a guy like that can really show up, especially a speed guy on the edge. That's where, he's gonna have his impact. And if you look at the roster and you go down the list of guys that he's really competing against, it would be Benson Mayowa. And possibly, Carrie Hyder and Carlos Dunlap and maybe Aldon Smith for snaps overall. But each player on that list I just mentioned is just a little different. Alton Robinson's a pretty well-rounded player. Mm-hmm. So you could feel comfortable playing him against the run on certain downs.
You don't want some of those other guys out there.
Like Benson Mayowa, because we saw what Benson Mayowa did last year playing 60% of the snaps. He got worn down 1/3 of the way through a game.
And then was worthless.
And Alton Robinson, on the other hand, didn't look like he was wearing down at all.
Yeah. So Robinson's a guy that I really do think is going to earn a spot. And is he going to be a starter? I don't believe so, because you've got a you got a defense with Carlos Dunlap on the roster, and it's not just a matter that, oh, well, he's, the old, the older vet and makes more money, but there's a reason why he's, a Pro Bowl player every year. But Dunlap's not going to play 100% of the snaps. He's going to play 60. That means someone else, there's going to be 40% of the snaps in that position for someone else. Is it going to be Benson Mayowa? Maybe.
I don't even know if Benson Mayowa makes the roster.
That's the other part of it.
And we haven't had a chance to really deep dive on the roster yet, like as an overall strategy. Mm-hmm. But when you look at it, it's very, very deep between the defensive tackles and defensive ends, and the diversity that some of those players bring. Alton Robinson being one, Carrie Hyder being another. You can go through the list. Benson Mayowa is not one of those players. Benson Mayowa has one job and one job only. One position only. And a guy like that might be at the very end of the Seahawks list. He might be one of those guys that is the last guy cut on the roster.
Yeah, because he can't play both sides of the line. He can only play the 7-tech side. We
saw how he got run down last year.
Yeah, he doesn't play the run well. He's a guy that you want to come in and rush the passer on third down, third and long, and get 20-25% of the snaps as kind of the high end. He's a pass rush specialist. If you can get the same production out of Alton Robinson as you do Benson Mayowa, not only are you keeping a guy that you have 2 more years of team control over, and a guy that is costs you less than half in terms of cap space, but you also are carrying a guy that is more diverse in his skill set and can play the run better and can play more snaps without getting run down better. So if they feel like they can get the same production, then Robinson will get the job every time, and a guy like Mayo will get cut. If they don't think that Robinson's ready because he's still making mental mistakes and getting out of his lane and that kind of stuff at times, then Robinson will continue to see the bench more than he sees the field, despite all the talent and potential that you and I have been talking about.
This is a big training camp for Alton Robinson. I mean, he's one of those players, Keith. He's literally has an opportunity to have 10 sacks in a season. I mean, you can see that kind of potential given the ability to take enough snaps. Mm-hmm. Although, again, he could end up with 4 playing 25% of the snaps, and it wouldn't surprise me either. It would just be one of those, well, Alton Robinson had the same year. That must be who he is. But he has an opportunity to be somebody that we don't know yet.
Yeah.
Okay. I've got my number 3.
Okay, your number 3, because my number 3 has already been taken. So
I'm excited about this player, and everyone should be. I think this is really the coming out year for Marquis Blair. He's competing with.
I hope so.
Yeah, he's competing with Ugo Amadi for the nickel corner spot. He's a free safety by nature. Probably could play strong safety the way that he hits and plays down in the box as well. So he offers you a lot of diversity, I think, on the defense, as well as special teams opportunities as well. So I like him as a player. I like his coverage skills. He was a tremendous cover guy in college. Hasn't had a tremendous amount of opportunity yet. That first year, he kind of made it in and out of the lineup. Very inconsistent. When he was out there,
the first year was really frustrating.
Yeah.
The safety play was terrible.
And here's this young kid that shows up and he makes plays and then he's out of the lineup.
Yeah. Because of injuries, he gets thrown out there and he's making play after play and he's always around the ball and he looks fantastic. And then, the guys who were terrible get healthy and they come back onto the field and you're like, wait, what?
No.
Why aren't you?
And it was just a Pete Carroll trust issue. Is that kind of how it played out publicly?
There was a lot of that. And it wasn't him. It was Ugo Amadi in the slot. It was, Blair at safety. And there was a couple other players that year. For some reason, they did not want to play young guys. They were trying to play veterans and not have mistakes and just be solid, fundamental, football, even if for less talented guys. It really didn't work, and it ruined the rookie year of some of these guys because they didn't get as much development as they could have if they actually played. It was really unfortunate.
What do you think about Marquis Blair's opportunity to be a breakout guy this year?
Oh, I think it's a great person to have on this list, and I wish that I'd thought of him because then he'd be on my list. But because he showed that rookie year that he belonged on the field, but didn't get his opportunities. He showed in training camp and preseason, and I guess it wasn't preseason, but his training camp and week 1 that he was going to be a big part of what they did in the secondary. And then he hurt his knee, and I mean he'd earned a big role in that defense. And it was just really unfortunate timing for him. So this year, like I said, I hope that he is a breakout player because the talent is there and he's just primed to make a big impact. He's an impact player.
Yeah. And
a guy that has a chance to be really good. And if he stays healthy and doesn't do what he did last year and get hurt early on, only good things can happen for Seattle if Marquis Blair is on the field and playing well.
So here's Pete Carroll in press conference last week, or the tail end of the week before, on Blair. He said he should be able to play and make a big difference. Carroll told members of the media, what we saw from him in last year's camp, we really were fired up about his addition. He was going to play a ton. He's stronger now than he was a year ago at this time, more physically fit in general. Really a high bar for that we're shooting for him, and we really expect him to be a big factor. That's big. I mean, even from Pete Carroll, that's spot on for him. I mean, that's one of the players that he's really focused on coming in and helping his defense. All right.
So that was your number 3. My number 3 was Ahkello Witherspoon. We already talked about. So shall we do my number 2?
Your number 2.
My number 2 is a guy that
You're going to choose one of my guys. I just know it.
Oh, have to. We're on the top 2. It is a guy that I was wondering if even qualified for this list because we say no rookies. That's one of our rules. We do.
I don't have any rookies on mine.
I know, and I don't either.
Oh, okay.
But he might as well be a rookie.
Oh,
he didn't play last year.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So Daryl Taylor did not play a snap. Only got a couple of weeks of practice. One in the middle of the season when he looked like he was about to be activated, but then he had some flare up of inflammation and stuff in his leg again, and so he got sat back down. And then right at the end of the season, he had a really good week of practice. But it was late enough there. It's like, yeah, we're not going to activate him. Now they've moved him to where he's going to be on the field 100% of the snaps.
No, because this is the most critical experiment this year in Pete Carroll's defense.
Because we know he can get after the quarterback. But he is so physically gifted in other ways. He's more than just a pass rusher. And so they moved him to strong side linebacker, and he's a
6'4", 265-pound strong side linebacker.
Yeah.
Who's expected to move laterally, backpedal, cover tight ends and running backs, rush the passer. Like you said, he's supposed to be on the field almost at least 90% of the snaps. Now, it might be a lower, depending on how much nickel they run. Mm-hmm. And so forth, but nonetheless,
and even in the nickel, they want him to move up and rush the passer.
It is true
because we know he has the pass rush skills. I mean, this guy's he's really athletic. Basically, this is the Bruce Irvin role.
Exactly.
Irvin was drafted in with that 2012 class, but in 2013 they moved him off the line to the strong side linebacker spot, and he played out there, was in coverage, setting the edge against the run, came up as a defensive end in the nickel, rushed the passer, and did all that stuff extremely well. Daryl Taylor is 30 pounds heavier, but all of his agility numbers are just as good as Bruce Irvin's. He's not quite as fast in a straight line speed.
Correct.
But all of his agility numbers are just as good as Irvin.
And he could very well be a better overall athlete. And Irvin's a very good athlete overall. Yeah. So Carroll said this about him, and I'll just read for a little bit. He's an outside player for us. Rush outside linebacker, both jobs he's taken a look at. He did a lot of outside linebacker work in college. He did a lot of dropping. He did a lot of rushing. We liked him as a rusher first. We still do. But he's got all the athleticism. He's a real natural athlete, really light on his feet. Burst, explosion, change of direction is really good. So this is not going to be a challenge for him to learn the position. We need to see how he feels when we do mix it up for him, dropping and rushing, knowing what we want to see him out as an outside rusher, as well as in passer situations. So we're really double teaching him. That's Pete Carroll speak. And just so he's just such a good looking athlete. He looks like he can do whatever we need him to do. So we have no real restrictions or hesitation on his range of play. So that's coming from Pete Carroll on a player that's 6'4", 265 pounds, just able to move all over the defense. And the exciting thing about, and he was number 1 on my list. The exciting thing about Daryl Taylor in this defense is that I really do believe that this is one of the missing pieces. Now, I love everything about whatchamacallit that vacates the position is not going to be back.
KJ Wright.
KJ Wright. Love everything about KJ Wright, and KJ Wright did a couple things extremely well. Probably one of the best linebackers at the position, covering screen passes and diagnosing all those things and so forth. And then coming up and making quick reads, avoiding traffic and congestion and making plays. He was excellent at kind of disengaging and avoiding. But Daryl Taylor reminds me so much of Frank Clark, and And from the sounds of it, he's even got more athletic upside and agility than Frank Clark had. So he's got the Frank Clark ability to beast guys completely out of the way, just throw guys, toss guys away and get to the quarterback. But he's got that thing where he can drop back into coverage. And if he can do all that and he's that player, this is the number one breakout player for the Seattle Seahawks, because a guy like Marquis Blair and a guy like Jamal Adams and a guy like Carlos Dunlap and Carrie Hyder all benefit from a guy that's able to do what he can do.
Yeah, I mean, the Seahawks really missed Frank Clark last year.
No doubt.
His ability to just rush from anywhere on the line and just be a thorn in the other team's side, where they were looking for him, accounting for him, trying to get help to whoever was going to have to block him, and all the different things that Frank Clark did. They missed that. Now they tried to say, okay, well, instead of having that one guy, we're going to have four guys. We're going to rotate guys through, and we're going to have not have that drop off in production when he comes off the field. But then it never worked out. I mean, a couple of the guys got hurt. A couple of the guys, got forced into roles they weren't ready for. And it turned out to be a mess until they went and got Carlos Dunlap. And then, the defense really took off. But Daryl Taylor has a chance to, they still have Dunlap. Taylor has a chance to add to that. So now they're going to have two of that kind of weapon. And they're going to play on opposite sides of the line and just really piss off opposing offensive coordinators with their ability.
Was there anybody here with Frank Clark that was able to take some of the pressure off him?
Well, for the first couple of years, it was Michael Bennett. But then,
but Frank wasn't quite Frank Clark yet at that point.
But then, there was the 1 year without Bennett where Clark was just insane.
Yes. Yeah. Right. And then we traded him. Yeah. Which was great. I mean, they obviously didn't, for whatever reason, they didn't want to pay him a second contract. And,
well, it's probably a good idea.
Yeah,
talent wise, yeah, but I mean, the guy just got arrested.
He did.
In a traffic stop, having an Uzi in his car. So yeah, but that's a whole nother issue. So, but they needed a guy. They need a guy like Daryl Taylor, with that kind of physical presence to just take over, part of the front seven and just be dominant. Physically, he's got the gifts. Now let's see if he can do all the little things and be consistent about it.
So you feel like he would be a guy that they would choose to keep on the field if they went into nickel, just move him up.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I do think he's going to be an outside linebacker and they're going to do those things, but they want him rushing the passer and
but
not just.
Who are they? Are they just going to kind of go into the best four they've got mode up front then when that happens?
There'll be times when, 3rd and 15 or, late in the game, if the Seahawks have the lead, where they'll run a NASCAR package and you'll see a pass rushing group of like Dunlap,
Taylor,
Robinson, and Mayo all on the field at the same time.
Or Hyder. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Just pick someone and be like, here, block all of them.
Yeah. And then have Jamal Adams coming at him.
Yeah.
Or Bobby Wagner coming up the middle. Mm-hmm. Or a guy that I'm just about to talk about and you probably have on your list.
Which is my number one person and your number two person. So
yes, that is correct.
Let's start with that one. Go for it.
Jordan Brooks.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, weak side linebacker, Jordan Brooks. He's got the upside that I don't even think we've even talked about really yet, as far as his ability, because when you first come into the league and you're next to Bobby Wagner, and you're just trying to figure stuff out, and some of your situation, you're dealing with an injury earlier in the year, and you're just kind of working yourself in, and you're really thinking about playing and where you're supposed to be, and you don't want to make any mistakes. That was Jordan Brooks through probably 10 games last year. And then the last 6 games plus the playoffs, Jordan Brooks was really a good player and made good plays. And you could see the speed and the instinctiveness come through his play and his ability to come down on the ball and then get to the outside was
like
really
having
remarkable.
Bobby Wagners.
What's that?
It was like having 2 Bobby Wagners on the field.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you and I both love KJ Wright, and he has been a fantastic Seahawk, but he had lost a step and was never the fastest guy. And
Jordan Brooks really exposed that.
Yeah, and when KJ moved to the other side and Brooks came in into KJ's old position on weak side linebacker, this difference in speed was obvious. And so now he's the fastest linebacker on the team.
And he's going to be turned loose. He's got a year in the defense. He's going to know way more in the offseason now. And I just think his upside is like Pro Bowl. Mm-hmm. And he's got even more potential than that, just because he gets a chance to learn from Bobby. He gets a chance to play in a Pete Carroll defense. He's going to have those opportunities as a weak side linebacker there to be on the field like 95% of the snaps.
Yeah, and if he doesn't get hurt, he doesn't come off the field.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the only time would be is if they go to some sort of dime package where they've only got Bobby on the field. And even then, they might want to rotate that, and sometimes in the dime only have Brooks on the field because he's faster.
You could see that transition beginning to happen.
Yeah. And so where Bobby doesn't have to play every snap of every game the entire season, because they've got a guy like Brooks who has that speed and that ability to get up the field into the hole and make the tackle before the running back can get going, which is why Bobby Wagner has been an all-pro forever. He's been the best linebacker in the league for years. Brooks has a chance to really take a lot of pressure off of him, because I just think this was my number one player, because as much potential and talent that Daryl Taylor has, Jordan Brooks has a year in the defense and a year of where he went through a lot of the growing pains and really looked good for the last like 5 or 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And this year, he could be a Pro Bowler this season. And if he goes from being, a guy that wasn't even supposed to start at the beginning of the year.
I wasn't even supposed to be drafted near the first round.
Well, yeah, he was.
You know what I mean.
Yeah. But if he goes from being a guy that they were trying to work in slowly last year and instead got kind of thrown in there because of injuries, to being a Pro Bowler this year, like that is a breakout. And that's why he's my number one, because I think he has that potential this season, not eventually, but this year to make that step. No,
absolutely. I agree 100%. I mean, he finished with 57 combined tackles last year. You could easily see him over 100 tackles this year. He only had 45, I think, percent of the snaps last year overall. He played more in the tail than he did in the front, but this year he could be close to 100 tackles, combined tackles. I think that he could probably end up coming off the edge a few times, a la Jamal Adams, and get to the quarterback. We haven't seen him in that role yet, but Keith, you can't deny the speed. If he has any instinctive ability at all, and they find that and they put that to use, I think he could end up getting after the quarterback, at least a dozen times this season and come away with 3 or 4 sacks, which would be a pretty decent impact from that position.
Yeah.
And then
the other thing is with his speed and his ability to cover a lot of ground in coverage,
mm-hmm.
is when you bring Jamal Adams on the blitz, or you decide to let Bobby Wagner come up the middle, because you got to remember Bobby Wagner is a good inside blitzer himself. And then you got a guy with tremendous speed and range right behind that, covering ground and trying to fill in the holes that are created by blitzing. And that's a really, really useful piece.
Well, that was my complete list, Keith. Do you want to talk about my hidden gems?
Actually, we kind of should, because we're a little short on time since we had.
I planned it that way, Keith. I swear.
3 of the 5 on our lists were the same. And then Alton Robinson and Marquis Blair were both on our just left off list. So,
well, I had Marquis Blair on my list.
I know, but he was on my just left off list. Okay,
gotcha.
And I had Robinson.
And yes,
one of your extras.
Gotcha. So my number 6 guy, the guy just missed the list, is Carrie Hyder, because he's like one of those undervalued 6th man guys in the NBA that come in and can take over a game late. And if they get hot, the coach ends up leaving him in there, and he ends up making plays, and he might end up making the play that decides the game. You know, Carrie Hyder's that guy on our defense. He's a guy that's going to be a lunch pail guy, which, you know, every team needs guys like that. I think they establish a veteran presence. They show other players how everything's done. He's kind of that guy. He's entering his 6th season. He's been up and down. He's had a couple of really good seasons overall, and 3 or 4 that have been marginal. And that's why he's available. And that's why he was available at the price that we had, because last year he had 8.5 sacks. In 2016, he had 8 sacks, but in between he had 2 sacks. So what player are you getting with Carrie Hyder? I don't know for sure. I want to say that he's going to be the player that he was last year with San Francisco, but at the same time, he was forced into a situation last year where he had to kind of come in and be the guy because of their decimation of injury situation. And so, and playing time is key for him as well. So you go back to 2016, he played 64% of the snaps. But he only had 45% of the snaps in 2019 with 1 sack. And in 70% of the snaps in 2020, he had 8.5 sacks, 49 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, and 18 quarterback hits.
But it's not just the number of snaps, but it's the situation. Because if you look at when he played last year, he played a lot of snaps because they needed him to, but because they needed him to be one of their pass rushers for them to have a shot to win, they didn't make him go out there and grind on 3rd and short or in the goal line and all. He didn't get a lot of snaps in those obvious running situations. They went ahead and pulled him off the field. Those are the 30% of snaps that he didn't play. So that way
he did end up with 49 tackles. I mean, you can't do that without playing against the run.
True, but I'm just saying, like in the obvious, like grinded out situations, 4-minute drill, that kind of stuff. They did a good job of rotating him and giving him, trying to maximize his effectiveness.
The good news is we have that same opportunity here.
Yeah, and it's very much what the Seahawks wanted to do with Benson Mayowa last year. They didn't do it early because of all the injuries, and he got forced into playing, and they couldn't rotate him and just always put him in there and in a position to be, high level successful. But then at the end of the year, once everyone got healthy and they got Carlos Skunlap in, then they were able to do the rotation with Benson Mayowa.
They became a very effective pass rushing group last year.
Yeah, and that's the kind of rotation that you want with Hyder. Is you want a situation where you're using him in the right way, in the right snap counts, right down in distance, so that you can maximize what he does. And I think San Francisco did a good job of that last year, and they got good results. And now Seattle's got an opportunity to do the same thing this year, and we hope we get good results.
So I have got one more player, but it'd be an interesting conversation to have just on the defensive end group this year and what their strategy would be like. You add Daryl Taylor into that as the strong side linebacker that comes up on passing downs, and then Jamal Adams in his blitzing ability. This group could be really interesting this year, and it'll be interesting to see who does not make the roster, because there are more names than there are spots. So the last guy that I just threw on my list as the 8th guy that I thought I should at least consider him, because if any injuries happen or if the Daryl Taylor experiment goes weird or whatever, a guy like Cody Barton could find an opportunity to be on the field a lot more this year than he has been in the past. And so I put Cody Barton on there. He's not my favorite player. He's not my favorite linebacker. He's okay at being a linebacker. I think he's terrific at special teams. But if he was forced into a larger role, it would be very interesting to me to see if he would rise to the occasion and take the reins and secure that spot, and maybe end up being a guy that we never imagined would end up being a 4 or 5 year starter at a spot and come in and take it and then never let it go.
Yeah, no, that's actually a good one. I thought about him as well. He didn't make my list, but I did think about him for that reason, because I mean, he was a 3rd round pick. He's got the physical skills. He's not the insane athlete that Jordan Brooks is. So even though it was they drafted Brooks only a year after Barton, when they did draft Barton, they saw him as the heir apparent to KJ Wright, and he was going to be the weak side linebacker long term. His coverage skills are good. He does miss some tackles, which Pete Carroll doesn't like because he's not
He's
as
out
sure
of position, right?
Yeah, he's not as sure of a tackler. I thought that could be coached. But what they had to do, because of all the injuries and problems, they moved him over to the strong side linebacker, and he's undersized for that. And he really struggled to get used to that role. It's something he'd never had to do. Coming up and setting an edge and not trying to get to the ball carrier, but instead trying to create containment and force the guy back inside to other players. It was a completely new role for him, and he got better as he got more playing time. And then the Seahawks found Brooks, and they're like, "Whoa, this guy is just like
lightning in a bottle, right?"
He's got all pro potential. Let's, the Cody Barton experiment was fun, but sometimes you just have to go with a better player.
Cody Barton may be one of those players that ends up having to leave the team in order to have the opportunity. Because
if he gets a chance to go be a weak side linebacker somewhere, I still think he can be really good, but he's going to require there to be an injury here in Seattle for him to get that opportunity. And he really just got blocked out of, being able to ascend into his role this year because they went and got a better player. But they drafted him with the idea that he was going to take over for KJ when KJ was done. Like, this should be the year that Cody Barton moves into that starting lineup. But that whole plan got derailed when Jordan Brooks was available and they went and got him.
Well, and we've talked about this in a little bit in the offseason when we were in speculation mode around the Russell Wilson trade stuff, and how would we, we were looking to find additional cap dollars as well to acquire talent when free agency first started. And we were thinking maybe Bobby Wagner, a player like Bobby Wagner, who has a large cap number, who is going to start a decline at some point. I don't know exactly when that is. But we were thinking maybe they would consider a trade because he could bring in the most, while his worth is at its peak. And so that would have moved Brooks maybe into the middle linebacker spot, and Cody Barton would have had an opportunity to get a starting spot there. But it just didn't work out that way.
I don't think the team really wanted to have both their star linebackers leave in the same offseason. Having Brooks next to Wagner this year, and then they can examine whether they want to have Barton next to Brooks or some other linebacker next to Brooks next year. That's a different thing, but there was no way they were losing both Wagner and Wright in the same offseason. I think that would have been that would have only happened if they had also traded Russell Wilson and basically signaled, "Nah, we're rebuilding," and so let's go ahead and get rid of some of these other guys that can fetch us a ton of draft picks so we can go make some picks. And they didn't do that, right? They got Wilson back. what Bobby was never.
They had a
on the trade
remarkable
block,
offseason, really. Yeah. When you boil it down. So Keith, I get it. Is there anything else around this or any other player that you thought of on the defense, or you could imagine even right now as we're just talking, that could be on this list or have some impact that we're just not thinking about right now?
Well, the one guy that I thought about and didn't make my list and really was like the first one that I crossed off and was like, okay, yeah, he's not going to be on there. There's too many others that are way better. But LJ Collier comes to mind because if you look at him as a rookie, and yeah, he had some injuries and had a hard time, really getting into everything, but he looked terrible as a rookie, just absolutely like a wasted draft pick. And then last year, he was a steady contributor. It wasn't ever flashy, and he's not going to be an all pro or anything like that, but he showed why he was a high draft pick and really was a good steady contributor, way better than we had hoped for. If he makes another jump this year, especially with now that he will have another year where he's playing both inside and outside, where he's playing, the 5 tech against the run and the 3 tech against the pass, and he can develop a little bit more in terms of his pass rush moves against guards. If he can come in and give the team 4 sacks rushing up the middle, that would be a big boost to the defense. And I think he has the potential to do that. And really kind of thrive in that role. But at the same time, we haven't seen him thrive in that role. So we'll see. I wouldn't hold your breath waiting for it to happen, but I would not be shocked if Collier has a really good year as an inside pass rusher.
I could see him having a jump. I really could. It calls into question though, what happens with Rasheen Green? Does he even make it out of camp? It calls into question, Alton Smith. Is Alton Smith even available to come to camp based on his legal stuff? If he is, that's awesome. But where does he find a role? Is he, he's obviously a decent, talented player. Whose snaps is he going to be taking? Is it Daryl Taylor's? It sounds like it. So it'd be interesting to see the split on the Daryl Taylor, Alton Smith thing. I mean, a nice problem to have for the Seahawks if it works out. But another player that I think he's probably been discounted his entire life, is DJ Reed. Came in last year out of nowhere.
Oh, see, I didn't have him as a breakout player because he broke out last year.
I don't know if he completely broke out, but he earned that spot.
He broke out last year.
But he could go to another level that we're just not even thinking about. And that's my point, is we're not even thinking about really DJ Reed having impact on this defense. But what if he would come in and have 4 or 5 interceptions and just completely lock down that side and be a really, really solid corner, and Witherspoon comes in and has a decent year? It could be much better than we are anticipating or thinking. And that's all I'm saying.
It's for me. I'm counting on DJ Reed being as good
really
next year as he was last year.
I could see that. I could see you counting on that, but man, that's a lot of faith to put in a position that's really important.
It is. And, but I think all of the question marks and everything for me is everybody but DJ Reed, because Reed didn't have a bad game last year. He didn't. He came in, he was on. Do
you remember what week he came in?
No, he was on the physically unable to perform.
Wasn't it like week 7 or 6 or something like that?
Yeah, you had to be out for 6 weeks and then you can come back and practice. And once he started playing in the slot and was an instant upgrade. Then they moved him outside because they just absolutely had to.
Well, whatchamacallit ended up hurting his knee and was completely worthless.
Yes. Dunbar.
Yes.
Quentin Dunbar. But he was a revelation out there. Like they didn't expect him because of his size and lack of length and everything. They thought of him as a slot only guy, but because of all the injuries, they had no other choice. And he went out there and did fantastic. And he didn't have a bad game. he had some games that were better than others. He had a few good games and a few great games, but he didn't have a bad game. And so this isn't like where he had like 3 games in a row where he played pretty well, and you're like, maybe he can continue that. No, he had like 8 games or 9 games in a row where he played really well.
Question for you, and it's my problem as well. How come nobody's really talking about him? Nobody's really talking about the secondary with any sort of gravitas at all. It's all just like, bleh, don't know what we're going to get. We're hoping it's just competent enough. I mean, that's the expectation level.
Because there's no Richard Sherman, right? In Seattle, we've been spoiled, right? We had Sherman from 2011 until he left, and when he left, we'd already had a year of Quill Griffin on the opposite side look fantastic, and they're like, okay, well, he's going to be the next guy, and maybe he never quite lived up to that, but he was still good. But where's the All-Pro? Where's the Pro Bowler in coverage? Now, Jamal Adams is an All-Pro, but he's an All-Pro as a jack of all trades guy that does everything, not as a coverage guy. And so you got a Pro Bowl caliber safety, but he's been up and down. You've got this kid on the outside who's tiny but really good. And then you've got a bunch of question marks, and there's not a lot of depth. And that's the reason why everyone's like, we'll see.
But Quandre Diggs made the Pro Bowl last year as well. Maybe not as a starter, but a guy that was right there.
It. Yeah. And so I was just saying, you've got in Seattle, we've been spoiled, and we've always had that one guy at that corner that we just can count on. And they don't, DJ Reed's that, but he's tiny.
Yeah. And that's why I'm wondering, like you said, that you're not even questioning whether or not he's going to have a great year. He's just going to be the same guy that he was last year, and maybe not,
I don't know. Teams tried to test him.
What happens if DJ Reed gets hurt? So, he had that pec injury that got him off of the 49ers roster. We ended up swooping in, but, we are one injury away in that spot from being a team that has Trey Flowers and Akella Witherspoon being the top corners, or worse. You got Trey Brown and maybe Demarius Randall or Pierre Desir. There's your corner group that is probably going to end up being your 5.
And that's the thing is that the depth is not what you want. You didn't mention Ugo Amadi, who's going to be the slot corner.
Or Marquis Blair.
Or Marquis Blair, who's also going to be the slot safety.
He's going to play somewhere. They flat out said that he's going to be on the field.
Yeah, so you've got those 2 guys which are going to get playing time. DJ Reed looked great last year, and he's going to be in and competing. 3
weeks ago, Keith, you mentioned just offhand right at the end of our show that you thought maybe Marquis Blair would compete for an outside corner spot. How do you still feel about that?
I still actually think that could be a thing. They like him in a more dynamic role as a safety, and
he was an excellent cover guy in college.
He's great in coverage, but he likes to hit people. He can come up. He makes good plays against the run. There's just a lot to like about his game.
Being a good tackler as the corner is underrated.
Yeah, I think they want him in a more dynamic role where he's all over the field than leaving him on the outside. But athletic profile, he fits. And if Akella Witherspoon and the other vets that they brought in don't pan out and they're not ready, Marquis Blair is in the equation. They will be disappointed they can't use his skills in better ways, but they won't feel bad about having him out as an outside corner and knowing that he'll get the job done. I just think they just want more from him than that. They want him to be have a more dynamic role because he is a guy capable of it.
This is like a fun roster. It's not a proven roster, but it's a fun roster.
Well, the thing is, you don't have to have, 53 guys that are proven whatever. You need youth, you need competition, you need potential, you need those things. And there's a lot of that. And it's mixed in with some guys like Bobby Wagner and Russell Wilson and Chris Carson. And there's a lot. There's a lot of on both ends. You got the vets that are proven. You've got a bunch of young kids with a ton of talent. This is a better roster than people in the national media want
I agree.
to give John Snyder credit for.
I agree. It is also a roster that's could go the other direction a little bit. Just
I mean,
by the nature of football, you might have some injuries. Some of those injuries might be to a key player. Yeah. You might have a rookie or a guy that doesn't have very much experience have to come in and have a larger role than the team anticipated. I mean, a lot of stuff can go on in a defense. I do believe that everyone is underselling this defense. I think that the way that the defense closed out 2021, not the last game, but just 2021 or 2020 in general, in the last 8 games, came on really strong, really made their mark as far as being a top 5 defense, I think, overall. Can they do that again? I think they have a better roster, better players, better depth across the board. Maybe not at the defensive back position, but that's yet, I think, to be determined. I think that story needs to be written. That's one of the reasons why, those guys are on our list.
Part of it, I believe, is that the defense was historically bad for the first 6 or 7 games. And we're not just saying historically as let's exaggerate. Literally, they were on a pace to give up more yards and points than any team in NFL history. There for a chunk in the beginning.
That's fun to watch as a fan. Just having your team completely run over for 8 straight weeks. I mean, literally almost just 8 straight, at least 7 of those 8 games where the defense was so bad that you just didn't know if your offense was going to be able to keep up. And somehow or another, we did, but it was crazy.
I think a lot of people are looking at that and saying, well, that's who the Seahawks are. And then they lost Quill Griffin and KJ Wright. And so now they're going to be even worse. And they're not taking into account the last 8 games when guys started to get healthy. And
we didn't have Carlos Dunlap in the first 5.
Yeah. And so, they traded for Dunlap and a bunch of other guys got healthy. Jamal Adams came back from injury and DJ Reed came back from injury and got onto the field. And they're just, the talent level got better and the defense was a top 5 defense down the stretch. And that really is what you and I see is Quill Griffin was good, but not great last year. He's not irreplaceable.
He had many, many plays where he was a detriment to that defense.
Yeah, he's in no way irreplaceable. Quentin Dunbar was terrible, so losing him actually is an upgrade. And losing KJ Wright kind of hurts because it's KJ Wright, but he was getting slower and slower, and it was gonna be hard for him to continue to play at a high level. And they got the young kids ready to step up in there. They've got better depth. They're faster.
Marquis Blair is coming back.
Yeah, and it's
Daryl Taylor's going to show. I really honestly believe Daryl Taylor's going to be going to really show out.
It's a better and deeper defensive roster than
Carrie
it was
Hyder.
A year ago, and they were a top 5 defense in the second half of the season.
Yeah, you got Alton Robinson in his second year.
A better and deeper group this year.
There's one player that I swear, if it turns out and it works, Robert Kimdichi could be the complete difference between this team making the Super Bowl and winning it, and not getting out of the second round, because the otherwise everyone else we're talking about, and I'm not trying to be a homer or whatever. I'm just reading it almost the same way that you're reading it, where everyone puts these things together, and you say that every year about every team. I get it. But this roster and the players that we've talked about have legit opportunities to be a really good, solid team.
Yeah.
All right.
The front 7 is as good and deep as you'll find. And
couple weeks ago, you were chastising me a little bit about comparing them to the 2013 which I was not trying to compare them, but I was trying to elevate them to a level that was similar.
You said was the best that Pete Carroll had, which of course means it would be better than
it would still need to be proven out. I mean, that is a little bit of hyperbole. I give you that, right? But if it's proven out, which it has the potential to be on paper, and that's all it is right now, I think that they could get there. You can say that about rosters that you can see on paper have the opportunity to get there. You can also admit readily when you see rosters that don't and can't. And I'm just saying that this roster has it written on them that they could be destined for a pretty nice defense here.
Oh, and I agree with that. I just think that you look around the league and you might find some defenses with some higher, like some just incredible talent, proven end of, guys, but over the whole front seven and the depth all the way down to the bottom of the depth chart in the front seven, this group is going to give any other team a run for their money. I think they're really, really good.
Yeah, we'll see what happens in our division, because that's the tell, because it's brutal.
The division is brutal. You have 4 of the top 10 teams in the entire NFL in the NFC West.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, Cardinals could be right there at 10 or 12 or whatever, but top 15, easy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's going to be a fun year. So let's tell people what we're doing in the next couple of weeks. So next week is one of your favorite shows, because you get to talk about one of your favorite hobbies.
Yeah. So we're doing the beer and question show where we ask each other some random questions. Some will be submitted by you guys, so feel free to get your questions in. Some of them we'll come up with on our own, just because we're obnoxious and we
like to talk and we need an hour and a half worth of questions. That's
why. But the other thing is, so the reason why we started this the first year was I homebrew, and so I brought a whole bunch of my home brews over to Bill's house. We recorded a show while sampling, and it was a lot of fun. And so we were like, hey, let's do this every year. So we're coming around. It's this year. Bill's now down in Phoenix, so I don't get to bring home brews over to his house, but instead we're going to sample various IPAs this year, and different styles of IPA, and talk about that. So it'll be a lot of fun. If anybody's online, and if anybody can get to the website or see the latest promotion thing that we've done, there's a picture of Keith that I took at the homebrew sampling question and answer show. I think in the second year. That picture is, I think, from our second year of doing that show at my house up in the Northwest. And you look like you've had your fill of samples in that picture. You're pretty happy. I might have. The best part of going over to your house for those shows is that my wife drove and dropped me off and picked me up, and I didn't have to drive home, because otherwise I would have had to have been there for a while before I was ever allowed to leave. Yes. But yeah, we'll have to do those. We'll have to do that again sometime, should the opportunity come up. Absolutely. And then we're doing the live show. Like, this show's kind of been in the works, at least in our brains for 3 or 4 months, maybe even longer. And we decided, logistically, we were going to try to pull this thing off. And so I'm flying from Phoenix into the Northwest. We're driving up together into downtown Seattle. We're meeting up with Dan Viennes from the Emerald City Sportscast. We're going to sit down at a table at Ozzy's at happy hour on a Monday. And we're talking Seahawks football for 3 hours, live streamed across the internet on like 3 or 4 different platforms. And we're having special guests, and we're doing ticket giveaways and some gift cards. And you guys should come down. I mean, we're doing it live, and we're doing it at a place like Ozzy's on purpose, so that people can come and join in the fun and get out, maybe for the first time in like a year and a half, to be with other people that are football fans just like you. Yep. So come join us. So it'll be a lot of fun. You'll enjoy it. We'll enjoy it. It'll be great.
Yeah. If nothing else, Keith, we will enjoy it. That'll be a great time. All right. So let's wrap this thing up. Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. I'm at NW Seahawk Northwest Seahawks. Seahawks Playbook is our Twitter handle. Seahawksplaybook.com is the place where you'll find all of our shows, both YouTube and podcasts. You can subscribe on any podcast platform as well as YouTube as well. And join us at the live show. Like, mark the date down and get down there and have a great time. Get a table early, submit some questions. We're going to be there a little early, so you'll be able to come out and chat with us a little bit before we have to sit down for 3 hours and hopefully not have to get up and go to the bathroom.
We'll have to get up and go to the bathroom.
I'm sure, yeah. Now that I've said it out loud, right? And so, yeah, come out and have a great time. So until next time, Keith, which is Tuesday, beer and question and answer show. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.